Anthony Belfiglio. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for
Man,
having me.
oh man, it is a thrill to welcome you to Jazz Piano Skills. And I know our listeners, the Jazz Piano Skills listeners, are going to enjoy this next hour to get to know you and to learn from you, quite honestly. So I am thrilled that you are joining us today. I know you're on faculty there at Belmont University in Nashville, and that's a pretty good music scene there, isn't it, man? Nashville,
Yeah, it's great. It's been great. It really picked up in the last 8, 9 years.
right?
Yeah.
How's that? You know, everybody thinks of Nashville as being a great kind of country music hub, you know. But how's the jazz scene there?
The jazz scene is healthy and well. Once again, I don't know the exact year, but about 8 or 9 years ago, we got our first jazz club venue, and I'll go ahead and plug
Wow.
them, Rudy's Jazz Room, named after Rudy Wooten. And
Okay.
since then, I mean, obviously with the pandemic, things have changed, but uh, you know, coming up to the pandemic, it's been really great. Weekly jam session over there and jazz every night. We also have the
Wow.
Nashville Jazz Workshop, which is a school and also a venue, and it's been great. When I first got here, there wasn't too much going on with jazz. I came in
Right.
2006. There were a few things happening, but it's really picked up since then. And you've got a lot of musicians in Nashville. They tour with major artists, but when
Right.
they're in town, they're kind of closet jazz players, and they're great, you
That's
know.
right.
Um,
Right.
so when they're not on the road
Yeah.
making money with a country star or whatever kind of star, they're home,
Yeah.
they've got their studio and they're playing
Yeah.
jazz and they're recording all kinds of great music, and there's tons
Yeah.
of people in Nashville like that.
Yeah, you know they pay the bills. They get the big bucks with those country gigs, man. And then, like you say, they're closet jazzers,
Exactly.
right?
But they're great too. I mean, they're
Well,
world class.
they're world class, right? And you can even when you listen to the sidemen with those groups, right? You can tell, right? I mean, you can just tell. You listen, and
Yeah.
go, okay, that guy can play, man. That guy can play. That guy can play. So anyway, so happy to have you here. How's the at Belmont, man? Any sports teams there at Belmont? You got any football or basketball or baseball or
Basketball.
anything like
So
that?
yeah, and I don't follow Belmont sports really all that much. I'm sorry, but yeah, the men's and women basketball team have done really
Pretty
well,
good.
and I believe we have
That's awesome.
baseball as well. No football.
Oh, yeah,
Soccer.
yeah,
So soccer, basketball, baseball.
right, yeah, and a debate team.
A debate team. Well, we had the
Yeah,
presidential
just
debate twice, so that was a
oh,
big
that's
deal.
right.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Well, let's jump in. I want you to take a little time right now to kind of share with the Jazz Piano Skills listeners a little bit about your story, your background, your childhood, how you got into music, some of your influential teachers and experiences that you've had throughout your life that have led you to where you are today as a jazz faculty member there at Belmont University in Nashville. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you right now and let you share you with the Jazz Piano Skills community. So take it away.
Sure. So you mentioned, starting with my childhood. So I'll start there if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh,
All right.
absolutely.
So I come from a non-musical family, but that being said, we did have a piano in the house, and we
Okay.
also had a piano in my nana's house where I spent a lot of time as a little kid,
Oh, yeah.
and there was a lot fewer distractions back then. So I
Right.
used to just mess around at the piano a lot when
Right.
I was looking for something to do, and I figured out how to improvise. I figured out that if I played an A minor triad in my left hand, that everything on the white keys would sound great over that. So I used to wail over A minor. It's one of my earliest musical memories.
Can't go
Uh,
wrong. You can't go wrong, can you, man?
I
Play A
know.
minor and play all the white notes, and you're good to go.
That's it. So that's the kind of stuff that I used to enjoy doing when I was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8. And then I did have piano lessons. And I had trumpet lessons as well after I got to fourth grade. And
Okay.
as soon as I graduated high school, I sold that trumpet because that instrument is a bear. So I got rid of
That
that thing
sure
pretty
is.
quick, so I could
I
focus
don't
on
blame you.
piano. And yeah, so I did have sort of sporadic piano lessons, and I enjoyed my piano lessons, um, but I did a lot of
I'm
things.
assuming.
Go
Yeah, I'm
ahead.
assuming those were kind of traditional classical
Um,
piano lessons.
well, from age um, 5 or 6 till about 11, it wasn't really classical. It was just fundamental stuff from piano method
Okay.
books, with some classical in
Okay.
there. I mean, we had recitals.
Sure.
Um,
Right.
I remember playing a piece like Solfeggietto, which is a classical piece by
Right.
Carl
Right.
Philipp Emanuel Bach, I think. Um,
Right.
s- you know, and I remember playing the sonatinas, and things like
Right.
that. So there was
Right.
some classical, but I also used to listen to rock music, and I used to like play songs on the piano by like Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Bruce Springsteen. Um, so there's a lot of stuff that I
Nice.
was kind of doing outside of my piano lessons. Not that I didn't like the piano lessons, but I just
Right.
gravitated towards other things like improv and composing
Right.
and rock music and things like that. So anyway, so yeah, so I kind of that's kind of a little bit about my upbringing. Like I said, we had piano lessons, me and my three sisters. I was the only one that stuck with it. And then I went to school for jazz piano at Temple University when I graduated high school, and I learned a ton there. I used to check out lots and lots of gigs, a lot of great music back in Philadelphia in those days.
Yeah. So, what attracted you to Temple? How did you end up going to Temple?
To be honest, I became a good student when I started graduate school. I was not the best student in high school or even
I,
undergrad.
I was the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I took music
Right.
seriously and I applied myself to music, but I wasn't really like a great student, and I didn't really check out a lot of colleges. I just kind of
Right.
wanted to stay local, and
Yeah.
I knew that there were people at Temple that could help me learn how to play jazz, and that was kind of the
Right.
thought process.
Yeah. Okay. Great. It's a good
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, but the nice thing about, being in Philly back in those days is all kinds of great jazz artists came through town, and I've seen everybody from Elvin Jones to Sun Ra to, you know, um,
Yeah. Right.
Branford Marsalis with Kenny Kirkland when he was still alive, and
Right.
Wynton Marsalis with
Right.
Marcus Roberts, and
Wow.
Tony Williams, the drummer,
Right.
lots and lots of just great people.
Well,
Ahmad
a lot
Jamal,
of
I saw
great
him live.
jazzers. Oh, yeah. A lot of great jazzers come out of the Philly area.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's what I did, and then eventually, I was living in Philly all of my 20s, and I was playing in a funk band, I was playing in a wedding band, I was doing some jazz gigs, I was in school, I was teaching because I was in graduate school, um,
Right.
and then I left for University of Miami. Um,
Right.
I left in I think 2002 is
Right.
when I left Philly for the University of Miami, and that was an
Which is a
adjustment.
yeah, sure. Right. And that's a very good music program.
Yeah, and I learned a ton there, and it
Right.
was really challenging. I went from being a guy in Philly that everybody knew, and I was gigging, and to nobody in Miami. I went to being nobody, and didn't have a lot of gigs the first
Sometimes it's
year.
good to be, yeah. Well, sometimes it's good to be nobody, man. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's I totally get it. Right.
Well, it
Oh,
wasn't that great because it was hard, because
right.
it was just weird not being surrounded by people who believed in me. Um, and that's one of the reasons I left. I just sort of felt like I
Uh,
needed a kick. I needed a change.
yeah.
Yeah, I just felt like
Who was on faculty when you went to Miami? Who was teaching on faculty?
Vince Maggio was the jazz piano instructor, and I caught him in his last 2 years. He retired the
Okay.
year that I finished my
Okay.
degree there.
Right.
So he was doing piano, and there's all kinds of great faculty members there at the time. Ron Miller,
Right.
great composition teacher, great composer. Whit Seidner was the director at the time. Don Kaufman was teaching bass.
Oh yeah. Right.
Uh, and all of the guys that I think I just mentioned, with the exception of maybe Don, I think are retired now. In fact, I know
Right.
Whit and Ron are retired. So yeah, so it was a great atmosphere. They used to have really, really fine guest artists come through and work with the students. So that was awesome. Like Mike Stern was great.
Right.
Who's James Moody,
Oh yeah.
the great drummer John Riley.
Right.
Um,
Right.
all kinds of great guests would come through Miami, and sometimes they would work with the ensembles that I was playing in and that sort of thing. So
Right.
that was fun.
Right. Well, I know one thing that it didn't take you long to get used to was winter in Miami compared to winter in Philadelphia. Come on.
Yeah, I remember being at the pool on Thanksgiving and like calling my family and being like, "You guys are freezing your butts off right now, and I'm here. I'm sunbathing by the pool here, you know."
Oh, underneath a palm tree.
Yeah, totally. It's a beautiful place, and we used to go to. I
Oh
was
my
already
gosh.
married at the time, so I was there with my wife, and we used to go to the beach and,
Oh.
and all that, and yeah, it was great to. I love the sun and the warm weather and tropical.
Oh.
I love all that stuff. So
That yeah, that's a beautiful campus too, isn't it?
it is, yeah. And
Yeah.
all of the natural
Yeah.
areas around there are really, really unique, and driving out on the
Right.
Keys is a great experience. Um,
Hey, but then you left Miami though, and then you came to God's country, man. Then you came to
I did, Longhorn Country, yeah. For those of you who are not watching on video, Dr. Bob just gave us a hook 'em horns sign. uh, yeah, so I got a great offer to go to Austin, Texas, and finish up
wow.
my education there. And you had mentioned earlier maybe some of the teachers that influenced me, and I'd have to say that Jeff Helmer down in Austin was the best teacher I've probably ever had. Um,
Oh wow.
no offense to my other teachers, because they were great too, but it was just he was just very generous, very honest, and just yeah, I think I was at a maturity level where I was ready to soak it in, and so that
That's
went
awesome.
great. So I really appreciate Jeff Helmer, and he's also a great player if you haven't heard him play.
Right, I have.
So yeah, and then I was applying for jobs for practice, because for those of you who are young professionals, it's a good thing to regularly do interviews, apply for
Right.
jobs, get yourself out there, work on your resume, your CV. So I was doing
Right.
that sort of thing, really not because I was expecting to get a job right away, but more just to get my feet wet with that sort of thing, and applied for a couple of jobs, maybe two, before I applied for the Belmont job, and I was fortunate enough to get invited to campus at Belmont, and you know, uh,
Yeah.
very grateful that here I am, and I just completed my 15th year here at Belmont.
Wow. Well, apparently, if you've been there 15 years, you enjoy it. And so, talk to us a little bit about the program there at Belmont. Believe it or not, here at I teach here at the Dallas School of Music, and we have a lot of high school kids studying music here, and a lot of them are always, every year, we have students that are always interested in Belmont University to go and study music. So, talk to us a little bit about the program there and your role specifically in the School of Music there at Belmont.
Sure, I'm happy to talk about Belmont. So, the first thing that we should know about Belmont is they do not actually offer a jazz degree at the moment, although fingers crossed,
Okay.
maybe down the road that's going to happen. But
Right.
we have a very large commercial music program, and jazz is a big part of that program. We also have some other programs. We have a whole classical program and various degrees that go along with that. But we do have a commercial music degree program, and we have over 800 music students total, undergrad and grad, last I checked.
Okay.
So it's a pretty large population. We've got a lot of wonderful singers in the commercial music program, which is really great for the pianists because they can play for their voice lessons, play for their recitals, play for their
Right.
gigs, and eventually when they do become the star and they go on the road, hopefully our alum, our former students can get out on the road with them. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of what the program is like. We have a very large population of vocal majors, pretty healthy on guitar as well, um,
Okay.
and yeah, we offer some slightly not really unconventional things, but the things that are maybe nowadays are a little bit more common but used to be rare. Things like mandolin and banjo and a bluegrass
Right. Right.
ensemble and a commercial strings
Wow.
program with like fiddling and that sort of thing. So the
Right.
strings program is another kind of dimension of Belmont, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Pretty
So
small
when
on piano right
you
now.
meant oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
So you mentioned the commercial. You say commercial music, right? So what does that's intriguing, right? That's intriguing for me. I'm going like, hey man, maybe I'll go back to school and get a commercial music degree. So what does that ultimately? What does that training students to be able to do upon graduation?
Well, that's a good question, and there's a lot we could say about the term commercial music, but maybe we don't
Right.
need to go too deep into that rabbit hole. But I believe Belmont was the first university to offer a degree in commercial music back in the
Right.
late 1970s, or maybe it was early 1980s. So they were
Right.
as far as I know, they were the first one to offer that. If you look around the country at different commercial music degrees presently, they're they're a little different, depending on what school that you're looking at. Um, the first thing, if you just think about the term commercial music literally, it sounds like a music business degree, right? Because
Right.
commercial means commerce, so music as commerce. Um, and some people think it is a music business degree, and there might be some other programs around the country that offer a commercial music degree that is more of a business degree.
Right.
Um, but at Belmont, it's a Bachelor of Music or a Master's of Music, and it's similar to a traditional music program in the sense that you get classical and commercial lessons on your instrument or
Okay.
voice, and you take theory and you take oral skills and music history and all the sort of staples of a music education. But then we also have these emphasis areas in the commercial music program that are a little more specialized. For example, songwriting emphasis, music business emphasis, performance emphasis, comp and arranging, and music technology, I
Mm.
believe, are our five emphases.
Okay.
Um, so in that area, there's a little bit more sort of forward thinking or cutting edge thinking, or you could say more of a practical business side of things. How are you going to earn money type of thinking,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think the appeal of the commercial music program is that we're training you to be professionals and to actually be able to make a living in music. Um, so you're not just isolated in a conservatory environment, which conservatories are
Right.
wonderful. I have nothing against them, but it's the focus is more on having a broader portfolio of skills,
Right.
and
Right.
just kind of like hopefully being able to work. And I will say that the alumni from our program, a lot of them are out there working and doing really really good
That's
things.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Right. So I noticed online you started or co-founder of the Belmont Jazz Faculty Group. Is that
That's
correct?
right. It's the Belmont Faculty Jazz Group is the name of the ensemble,
Okay.
and basically
Okay.
we just play for our students, and the
Oh,
public is
fantastic.
invited as well.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so
awesome.
we put on before the pandemic. We were doing two concerts per year for our students, and like I said, the public is invited, and we've had some pretty great guest artists over the years, and some really great shows. Um, But yeah, it's a little bit of an
Yeah.
under the radar kind of thing that I do at Belmont. But I've been doing it for a
Right.
long time, and I have a great group of colleagues. And we're actually going to start scheduling some rehearsals up here really soon because we didn't play last year because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. Right.
so yeah, it's a great group, and we also draw in other faculty members that are not part of the core group per se. So we'll feature other faculty members from time to time as well.
Right.
But we didn't do much this past year, but we're looking forward to playing some
Yeah.
more music again real soon.
Wow. And I think everybody's excited to begin hearing live music again very soon too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No doubt. Right. So, okay, I got a couple questions for you. Before, we're going to jump into some jazz education here as well. But before we do that, I noticed you have a couple publications, and I want you to talk about each of these a little bit. Right. Number one, I think it was your dissertation that you did at UT. It's called The Fundamental Rhythmic Characteristics of Improvised Straight Ahead Jazz. Did I have the title of that dissertation
You
correct?
you do. Yep.
Oh wow, that's good. See, my doctoral training has prepared me well, man.
That's right.
So, so, okay. So talk to me about your dissertation, the fundamental rhythmic characteristics of improvised straight ahead jazz. I think that's fascinating. I want to hear more about it and what you discovered in your dissertation.
Well, thank you for asking. It's been such a long time since I've talked about it. I
Yeah,
definitely,
we all put it away.
yeah, right. I definitely, I feel like it was a great contribution to jazz education. I'm trying to think of like a not too dry way of talking about it because it is a little dry and tedious. Um, but um,
Oh,
it includes some transcriptions with an
okay,
analysis of based focused on rhythm. Most of the time when we look at
okay,
transcriptions, we talk a lot about the chords and the modes that go over the chords and that sort of thing. It doesn't really go there. It's
right,
more about the rhythm, the rhythmic content, and things like feel. And there are also some micro timing studies in there where you go into in this case, they were Pro Tools files, and you measure the attack transient, which is the beginning of the note, and
right.
you analyze the micro timing at like the millisecond level. So there's some of that in there. But it's a big old 300-page book, and if you go online and you just type in like my name and dissertation or the title of the dissertation, I believe it pops right up. The whole PDF of it just pops right up if you Google it. At least last time I checked,
Yeah,
it did. So
right.
it should be readily available. The second chapter, which is the review of literature, I think is a really interesting and really good chapter if you're interested in rhythm, and
Right.
both in terms of micro timing studies, but also just in broader terms like the importance of jazz rhythm and what is swing and these kind of things. I think that's worth a read. The rest of it
Yeah.
is definitely tedious and technical, but it's kind of
So,
hard to do a book on rhythm, and everybody always
wow.
says rhythm is the
Yeah,
most important. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
right.
Yeah,
Well, and
everybody.
not only to do a book, but to do a 300-page book.
Yeah. Well, well, a lot of that was the transcriptions. They took up a lot of pages.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's 300 pages of pretty dry stuff, but
So,
I,
so, so jump to the conclusions. What
okay,
were you?
yeah. So I mean,
What's the takeaway?
well, man, I should have done some preparation. I'll try to remember. Um,
Yeah, right. I'd be the same way with my dissertation. So,
I mean,
um,
some of the conclusions are kind of obvious, but it's like a lot of things. It's kind of obvious, but until you really look into it and study it, it's
right,
not.
right,
You can't just take it for granted until you really go in and study it. So, one of the things that
right.
I found is that, like in the micro timing stuff, is that the accompanying instruments tend to be more exact or precise with their timing, whereas the soloist tends to be looser or freer with the
Oh,
timing. So,
right,
like, if you analyze
right.
the same pianist when he or she is comping, you might find that the rhythms are pretty precise, but then when it's time to take a solo, they for expressive reasons, they take more liberty with the time and that sort of thing. So now that's obviously a generalization that I found in the recordings that I studied. So whether or not that can translate to other recordings is, certainly
Well,
a
that's
question.
that's a fascinating observation there, because really the soloist can become free can become looser with time, with the more stable the time is that's behind them, right? So
Right.
so I've always said a great drummer actually sets you free,
Yeah.
and so that observation, that, like you said, it makes sense when I sit down and think about it. That makes sense that whoever's not soloing, the accompaniment instrumentation is kind of nailing down time, so that soloist can actually experience great freedom and a looseness with their playing.
Right, and I also looked at the relationship between the bass and the ride cymbal, which I can talk about if you want, or we can skip that. And what else? And
We don't care about we don't care about bass and ride cymbals.
I care a ton. It's just a little dry, but yeah. So I wasn't the first person to study that, but my conclusions were kind of the same as the other studies that I looked at, which were that a lot of people think that the bass plays ahead of the ride cymbal. Like a lot of people will say that the bass player plays ahead of the ride cymbal, or more on top of the beat than the ride cymbal.
Right.
But
Right.
most studies have found the opposite to be true, that the ride cymbal is a little bit ahead of the beat at the micro level. But the thing that you have to realize is that, and this is the other interesting thing about the whole dissertation, is that the way the sound develops over time is very different. So like when you pluck a bass string, it takes a long time for that thing to resonate and sound like a note to your ears, Whereas when you ping on the ride cymbal, it's immediate. And if you just look at the waveforms on the screen, like if you're looking at a Pro Tools thing, you can see the difference. You can see that the ride cymbal has the sharp attack and the bass takes a long time to develop. So it might feel like the bass player is pushing all the time, and playing a little bit ahead of the ride cymbal. It might sort of feel like that, but if you keep in mind how long it takes those bass notes to develop and proceed, that's probably why the perception is that the bass player has to kind of drive the bus and kind of be on top of the beat.
Yeah, great observation. Another book that I saw that you had put out there is Kenny Kirkland Solo Transcriptions, right? The system.
Yeah.
So what is that? What is that all about? Kenny Kirkland Solo Transcriptions.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I really hope people will check this book out. If you just go to kennykirkland.com, you'll find it, and you have to click on the page, and then it gives you the ordering information. But yeah, it was published by The System, which is Gene Perla's company. Are you familiar with Gene?
I am not.
Okay, he's a bass player. He's been around for many, many years. He's located in Pennsylvania at the moment. But he played with Kenny back in the 90s in a group called Stone Alliance, which was Gene's and a percussionist's band. And I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the percussionist's name. That's really, really bad. Don Elias.
Oh, yes, sure, right.
Don Elias is the percussionist. Yeah, so Gene and Don had a fusion band for a while, and Kenny was in the band, and Gene also lives right down the street from Jeff Tain Watts, who's the drummer on a lot of the Kenny Kirkland things that I transcribed. Right. So anyway, I think there's 8 solos in there that I transcribed. They're all really, really accurate, and I did a whole concert where I had to play the solos with the recording. And the scores were streaming on the screen while I was playing, which was kind of an interesting concept. But so I learned all the solos note for note and had to play them. And I was really lucky to hook up with Gene, and Gene published the book for me. And it's also available through Jamie Aebersold as one of the distributors.
Oh,
so if you go to his website, what is his website called again?
I think it's J.A. Jazz, right? No, it used to be called J.A. Jazz, but I think it's called jazzbooks.com now.
Yeah, something with books in it, I think.
Yeah. But
anyway,
if you just
Google Jamie Aebersold, I'm sure you would find it. So he's one of the distributors. but Gene prints the books. They're not available in PDF. You actually have to buy the
Okay.
book, and that was just because I don't want all the solos to end up on the internet.
Correct.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So Kenny was just such a great musical soul, and obviously he passed away. I believe it was in
Right.
1998, tragically at a young age, and that there's not that much stuff about his contributions out there, really.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so that's why I did the book, and also because when I really kind of first started listening to jazz, he was one of the people that I started listening to kind of in the early
Right.
90s. Um,
Right.
his stuff with his stuff with Branford Marsalis. That was some of the earlier jazz that I actually
Right.
got really into when I was young. So yeah, I'm really proud of that book, and there's a short little bio about Kenny in there as well, and the transcriptions, and that's it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, another thing I want you to talk about. I saw on the internet because I was stalking
I
you,
know.
dude. I was out there, checking you out. Yeah, and one of the things I saw was a video of you playing an Art Tatum transcription, right? I
Yeah.
can't remember the tune. What Tiger Ray? What,
Lullaby,
what I can't
Lullaby of
remember.
the Leaves.
Lullaby of the Leaves, right?
Yeah.
So I remember when I saw that. First of all, I hadn't even listened to it yet, right? But I saw that you were playing Art Tatum. I said, man, anyone that's attempting to play Art Tatum, that's a serious cat right there. So, talk to me about that video. Did you do a series of those transcriptions, Art Tatum transcriptions, or talk a little bit about
No,
that?
unfortunately, I only did the one. I can't remember what year that was. I mean, it's got to be 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay.
It was basically like, so I'm really into transcribing, as I'm sure you are, and I
Yes.
think most jazz educators and jazz musicians transcribe and listen a lot. And I was always super intimidated by Art Tatum, still am. And it was
Who's
it
not,
was
right?
just yeah, right. It was just one of those things where is it possible that I could do this? And it was a summer project. It took me several months to do it. Um, but I listened to a bunch of his stuff, and I picked what I considered to be the easiest, most likely thing that I could pull off. Um, and it was great. I transcribed the whole thing, and I learned how to play it. And anytime you do that, you learn a ton. And the other thing I did was my hands are not that large. Um, I can reach some tenths, but barely. But obviously, Art Tatum could reach tenths very easily. So I also did an adapted version of the transcription for people with a little smaller hands as well.
I saw that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and they both sound pretty good. And the one that I played is the adapted one because I couldn't reach all of the stuff in what he played.
Right.
So it was just one of those things I did to challenge myself, and yeah, I get very, very little traffic on YouTube. Maybe this podcast will help, but that's the one video.
Well,
That's
right.
the one
Everybody
video
should
that's
go out
got
and
the
check.
most views.
Yeah. Well, everybody should check it out. It's fantastic. Yeah. It's a great performance, man. It's a great recording. You did awesome. It was tremendous.
Yeah, it was recorded right behind me here on one of these pianos, the one in the back right there.
Oh, there you go. I see.
That's,
Yeah.
that's
Awesome,
where I
man.
recorded it.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little jazz piano. Let's talk a little jazz education. So this is kind of, I call it a rapid fire round where I'm going to throw out some jazz piano skills, and I'm just going to throw out a skill, and I'm going to let you run with it and kind of speak a little bit about how you approach the study and practice of that skill. And if you have any do's and don'ts that you would offer up to the Jazz Piano Skills listeners, provide those as well. So I'm going to start with the skill that I think everybody talks about, maybe the most popular skill to talk about in jazz, and that is the skill of being able to play scales and arpeggios. So talk a little bit about your approach to scales and arpeggios, practicing them, and how you work with students there at the university to help them get the most out of their scale and arpeggio practice.
Okay. Well, first off, and I don't mean to be a problem with with this answer, but I think it's always better to play music rather than play exercises. So just wanted to get that out there. So yeah, but exercises can be helpful. But I always think, you know, if you have limited time, if you only have 30 minutes, you're better off playing music than playing exercises. You know. But anyway, to me, like the thing about scales and arpeggios on the piano is that they're very visual.
Right.
So
Right.
the way that it works for me, I don't spend a lot of time practicing scales and arpeggios, although I guess over the years I have. I do occasionally go back and do it. But to me, it's being able to see the seven notes in the scale, which are the same as the seven notes in the chord, right? Like if you think about a scale,
Correct.
like one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, with whatever variations, and you think about a chord, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. Those are the same thing, right?
Exactly right.
So yeah, so to me, a visual element of the piano, being able to see whether it's a simple scale like C major, which is all white keys, or if it's something that's on the surface more complex, like an altered dominant scale, which is actually not more complex because it's still seven notes, right? You know, so
Right.
whatever the scale is, like just kind of being able to visualize it on the keyboard, I think is really important. And just in terms of the white key and the black key configurations, and then you know when you're playing, you can see when you have a chord, you know you're playing a tune and there's a chord C major 7 sharp 11 or whatever the chord is, you can see that chord all over the keyboard through the entire 88 key range. So when you're improvising, it's kind of like all of those
Right.
notes are available
Right.
to you. And obviously you can go outside of the mode and you can use chromaticism and things like that as well. But to me, like connecting the seven note scale or mode with the seven note chord built up to the 13th and understanding how those two things are the same is really important and helpful. Arpeggios are difficult on the piano, you know, like I think they're a lot more difficult than scales. So arpeggios are good if you're just having trouble with the technique of just getting your fingers to play the correct notes accurately. Like seventh chord arpeggios are really
Right.
difficult for me. Um,
Right.
so arpeggios are really good for just kind of like teaching your hand where to go. Um,
Right.
and back to what I was saying about the scales and the arpeggios, the scales and the chords. There's this technique that psychologists call chunking, which sounds kind
Right.
of funny, but all it means is that when you're looking at something that has a lot of information in it, like a scale has seven notes, um, you can chunk all of those notes together in your brain very, very quickly. So you can immediately name all of those notes. It's kind of like spelling a word, right? Like
Right.
once you've used a word long enough, you don't need to think about the individual letters in the word. It just crystallizes as a
Right.
thing. So to me, like a scale or a mode,
Right.
it's a sound and it's a group of notes. And when all of that stuff chunks together in your head, where it's a no-brainer and you can access it instantly, that's kind of what you need as a pianist because you're playing the chords all the time, right? So you need to know what the notes are and all
Correct.
of the chords, but you don't have time to sit there and generate the notes one by one.
Right.
They have to chunk all together as one thing. So I think practicing scales is good for that, and same thing with arpeggios and chord voicings, and then connecting
Right.
the chord voicing with the scale and seeing how it's all the same thing.
Yeah, that's very important, and you're absolutely right. That's one of the things I stress to students here all the time, right? Is seeing harmony and melody as being one and the same, right? The harmonic structures. You talk about a musical sound going from the root to the 13th. The seven notes. That's the entire sound, right? From the root
Yeah.
to the 13th, and then being able to maybe chunk things together within that sound, right? So maybe practice the scale instead of practicing the scale from the root to the 7th, maybe practice the scale from the 3rd to the 9th, or from the 5th to the 11th, or from the 7th to the 13th, right? So now the ears are engaged at a whole different level as opposed to just going from root to root, root to root. I tell students all the time that the ears are just hearing octaves at that point, I like to
Yeah.
have different entry points. I like to have a different entry point and different destination point, and chunk, fragments. I call them little, sound fragments, right? Where you
Yeah.
take the entire sound and then you break that sound. You practice that sound in fragments using scale motion or using arpeggio motion. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's the visualization of the piano is an asset for us as pianists. That is an asset. Sometimes I often wonder how a saxophonist, how do they create that same kind of imagery that we have that the piano gives us. So it's a big plus in our favor. So we should take advantage of it.
Right. And that's interesting what you say about not always starting on the root, because one of the things that you've probably observed this as a teacher too, when you tell a student, okay, you can play this scale over this chord and this scale over this chord and this scale over this chord, and then they start the scale on the root all the time,
Right.
because we're just so used to like starting the scale on the root, and also we're so used to always doing ascending first and then descending, right? It's like it doesn't have to be that way, right? Like you could start in the middle of the scale and you could start with descending and then ascending and change direction a
Right.
few times
Right.
and what have you.
Right.
But yeah,
Right. Well, and I try to stress to students, when you improvise, when you're improvising using scale motion or using arpeggio motion, you should see the looks I get when I ask, I'll ask a student, I'll play the note C and then I play the note D. And I say, is that scale motion? And they look at me like I'm asking a trick question, right? Because again, we think of a scale. They want to think of a scale from going from C to C. That's the
right.
scale, C to C. And I'm going like, no, C to D is scale motion. So if I ask you to improvise over this chord using scale motion and you only use the notes C and D, congratulations. You've just used scale motion when improvising over that chord, right?
Sure.
And just like an arpeggio, C to E flat is arpeggio motion. It doesn't mean you have to play the entire arpeggio or the entire scale. So
Sure.
It's funny that you bring up the ascending D. Like you said, we always want to think ascending first, and we get caught in these little traps, right? Very
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah, and I noticed that like my left hand descending scales were not as good as like my left hand ascending
right.
scales or my right hand ascending and descending scale. Like I noticed that like years ago, I was like, okay, well
Right.
maybe if I'm going to practice scales, maybe I should start with the left hand descending, like get that going a little bit better.
Right. All right. Well, good. All right. What about? Let's talk voicings. Voicings for a pianist is kind of when you start talking voicings to the young jazz pianist, you can kind of see the sweat form on their heads because it can be a very confusing area, and if we're not careful, voicings, I always say that voicings are it's like fishing line. It can get tangled up very, very quickly if you don't have a way of approaching it conceptually, orally, and physically. So talk a little bit about how you figured out voicings for you and how you go about helping students get a handle on this concept of voicing.
Okay, as far as how I figured out voicings, it probably goes back to my first jazz piano lessons in college. Now, I did have, I never actually had a proper jazz piano lesson, I guess, before college. Although I had some teachers that were telling me to check out Bill Evans and Pat Metheny and stuff. So
Right.
but I didn't really do a ton of jazz piano. So I think probably my teacher probably showed me a lot of the voicings and ways to practice voicings when I first started, and I don't remember that terribly well. The other place where I learned voicings are from transcribing, especially like when you're transcribing a
Right.
jazz pianist and you transcribe that left
Right.
hand. That's like really valuable information. And one of my pet peeves is when somebody transcribes a jazz pianist and they transcribe only the right hand. It's like,
Right.
hello, we have
And they
two
put
hands. And there's this great there's this great jazz pianist, Sullivan Fortner. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a younger
Yes.
guy, but he was one of our jazz piano guests here at Belmont. And the way he described it is he said, when you transcribe jazz piano, the right hand has the style and the flair and everything, but the left hand has the information, you know. So like when you start to transcribe those left hand voicings, when you're transcribing jazz pianists, it really helps you specifically to know what tones they're choosing to use and what tones they're thinking about and that sort of thing.
Right. Right.
So yeah, and I'm sure there's some books that, you know, I don't use any particular book for voicings. I mean, I'm familiar with the John Mahegan book, which is where we got the AB form voicings out of that book.
Yeah, right. Wow, you're going back when you mentioned John Mahegan. Not a lot of people know John Mahegan, especially the younger cats, not familiar with John Mahegan. But he was like, honestly, I think he was like the pioneer of jazz education. One of the very first, if not the first, to try to put into writing what jazz musicians do.
Yeah, I should check him out more than that. Now that you said that, I should check him out more. But yeah, so you know, a lot of times jazz pianists talk about the AB voicings, which is just a designation for ways to play these voicings. And I believe that's right from his book. I mean, it's from Bill Evans and other pianists as well. But I think as far as putting it in a book, I think he was the first one to put it into a book.
Right.
And I think he was the guy that came up with the A and the B terminology.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as like, you know, you asked me about scales and arpeggios, and I kind of said that music is always better than exercises. I do think voicing exercises is really important at the beginning stages for jazz pianists. And if you haven't learned how to chunk the voicings in your head, like it really needs to be instantaneous, you know. So if I'm playing like, you know, E, G, A, D from the bottom up, that's my C6-9 chord. Like I don't have time to like sit there and think about those four notes. It just needs to be. It's a grip under my hand, right? And it's a sound, and you should be able to do it up and down the keyboard and invert it and everything. So yeah, it comes back to that like chunking thing again, where you use the voicing as a unit in your head. It's not just a disparate collection of notes, but it actually has a feeling, it has a color, a sound that you like, and when you play it, you know what it's going to sound like, and your hand knows it. You have it in your motor memory under your fingers, and when you hear it, you can recognize it because you've listened to it so many times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I used to have a teacher. I used to have a teacher in lessons, and this is when I was a young kid, man. I was only like 14, 15 years old. And he'd be talking to me, right? And when he's talking to me and teaching me, he would be holding his hand up, and he'd be talking about a chord, and he's holding his hand up, right? And I used to think, I remember as a kid going like, what the heck is he doing? Like sign, but he was holding up the shapes.
Yeah,
he was holding the shapes up in his hand.
That's me when I teach theory. Like if a student asks me about a scale and I have to like tell them the notes on the scale, like I'm holding my hand up, my fingers are going, and I'm visualizing. That's the only way I can do it, you know. Like I'm not sitting there thinking about the musical staff or the key signature or the intervals. I'm going right to the fingers and the keyboard, you know.
Yeah, it's the same thing with modes, right? Students get wrapped around modes, where I always try to explain them that modes are really a really fancy every good boy does fine. In other words, you know, we teach the beginning student every good boy does fine as a way to learn the musical staff. But we want them to forget that as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Right? And we just want them to see E, G, B, D, right? We just want them to see the musical staff. I said modes are a way to explain to us how to get to a sound, right? Yeah. So, you know, so instead of thinking of the C Mixolydian mode, it's the C dominant scale. You'll no longer think of it as the F major scale starting on C. You just get to the point to where that's just the C dominant scale, right? So the mode is an every good boy that's fine that gets us to the goal line, to where we need to get to.
Yeah, so however you're practicing your exercises, they should feel effortless at some point, right? Like,
correct.
That's how you know that you didn't just waste your time. I mean, if you're sitting there practicing exercises and it feels difficult and it doesn't feel effortless and it's not coming together, crystallizing and coming together quickly in your brain, then
Right.
you're not really making much progress there. But as soon as it starts to feel effortless and like a no-brainer,
Right.
then you're starting to make some progress.
Right, because we want music, especially in playing jazz. Right, it's a instinctual response to the musical stimuli that we're taking in. It's a instinctual response, muscle memory, oral memory, and but to get to that point, there is an analytical process to get to that point where we have to actually spend time thinking about what it is that we're doing. And quite oftentimes a student will say to me, when I'm explaining the analytical side, I get the question. I always get the question, well, do you actually think that way when you play? And I'm always going like, no, I don't think that way when I play. I think that way when I practice.
Right.
When I play, it's time to play and rely on my oral memory, my muscle memory, and my conceptual understanding to instinctually respond to the stimuli. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, oh, I absolutely agree. And yeah, it's like there's the analytical versus the intuitive or instinctual, as you
Right.
just said.
Right.
And I think, one of the things about teaching a lot is that you get good at the analytical stuff because you have to explain it, right? So,
Correct.
yeah, so
Correct.
that's one of the reasons why I appreciate. There's a lot of reasons why I appreciate that I've had a career in teaching. Um, but yeah, just sometimes you learn something or you do something and you don't have to explain it, and it just always stays at the intuitive level. But then when you have to explain it to somebody, and you have to break it down, you can go to the analytical side of it. But both are important. But yeah, but
No.
when I play, I don't want to be hindered by a bunch of thinking, right? Like that's the like when I can hear myself thinking, like that's not a good take. Like let's trash this take and let's do another take, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
You
yeah,
don't want. Yeah. You don't want to hear you think, and we don't want to hear you think. Right.
right, right. And you don't want to hear me
Right.
playing exercises either, right? So like the
Right.
exercises and the thinking that's like the stuff you need to take care of in the woodshed, get it taken care of so that when it's time to play music, all of that stuff is effortless and it's all second nature. And maybe not all of it, but maybe 90% of it or whatever the percentage is,
Right.
you can
Right.
play intuitively. And then, maybe there's a few tunes on the set where you're not as comfortable yet and you really have to kind of concentrate or whatever, and that's okay.
Right.
But for the most part, you want it to just come out really instinctively because then it's going
Right.
to sound better and feel better and all that.
Correct. So, okay, here's a really easy question for you. Super, super easy that you can probably answer in 60 seconds or less. How do you go about helping students learn how to practice creativity, learn how to practice improvisation? Now, I was joking about the 60 seconds because I know that's a
Right, right,
that's a big
right.
topic right there. But
Yeah.
how do you,
So
right? The concept of practicing creativity is for a lot of people that's kind of that's a contradiction, right? It's a contradiction.
yeah,
Practice creativity? But the reality of it is we do. So
right.
how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, obviously, and I don't know that I have a great answer for it, but I'll start with saying that like one of the things that's nice about being at Belmont is that you're surrounded with creative people. So
All right.
you're constantly observing other people doing these creative things, whether it's the students or the faculty. So that's really important. Is just being in an environment where other people are going to inspire you to be creative because they're being creative, and of course that gets into the whole like thing of with the competitiveness and that, which is a whole other discussion. But if you can find yourself in an environment where people are creative, maybe there's a little bit of competition, but it's not like cutthroat, hardcore competition because that doesn't usually help anybody.
Right.
But it's more just being inspired by your peers and your colleagues and what they're doing around, and what they're listening to, what they're playing, what they're composing. So I think being in an environment where there's a lot of creativity is really important. And I think being around people that are non-musical artists, like visual artists and dancers, actors, and things like that also helps as well. Just to being in a creative environment.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, so practicing creativity. Wow, that's an interesting term. Like practicing improvisation is something I've thought about a lot more, but practicing creativity is a little bit more general and broad. Um, I will say that it's a lot more fun to, if I have 3 hours in the middle of the day to kill, it's a lot more fun to practice to do something creative than it is to practice exercises and practice, you know, doing things
Right,
by rote,
right,
or just doing things.
right,
And part
right,
of practicing is the repetition. I mean, you can't get away from it, especially if you play piano, right? Like you got to
right,
just practice things like multiple times and over again until it's effortless.
right,
Um, but yeah, but if I have some time to do something creative, try to compose something, try to arrange something, do some free improv, improvise over some tunes. All of that stuff can be lots of fun. I'm a huge fan of free improvisation. Um, just sitting at the piano and just seeing what happens, maybe recording it and listening to it
right,
afterwards, and getting together with other
right,
people and practicing freely. Um, real
right,
quick story. Mark Johnson, the great bass player, he came through Miami when I was
right,
there, and he gave a clinic, and he talked about how he practiced, and basically, he didn't practice any like bass stuff, like he didn't like practice like walking bass lines or like bowing long
wow,
tones or scales or
right,
arpeggios or like
right,
different finger positions
right,
on the neck of the bass. Like he wouldn't practice. He didn't talk about any of that stuff. He said, when I practice, I just try to get into a creative space right away.
wow,
And he demonstrated this in front of a huge group of students and faculty members, how he practices, and it was just basically just free improvisation, or you might want to call it spontaneous composition. Like he just wanted to get to that creative place right away
right,
when he
right,
practices. Now, maybe when he was younger, maybe it was different, but
right,
so
right,
I think maybe balancing the creativity with the more mundane sort of technical, sort of rigorous kind of practicing, like maybe balancing those two things and favoring the creative a little bit. So maybe
right,
20% or maybe 30%, of the exercise type of stuff, technical kind of stuff, and then like 70% of the musical creative stuff is somewhere in there is probably
right,
a good balance. But
right.
how to do it is that's a tough one.
It is
Yeah,
tough. It is tough, and I think one of the challenges that students have, and not just students, for us as well, right? I think one of the challenges is that we always start with too much information. So what
yeah,
I always try what I try to get students to do is I tell them that creativity is a product of limitations, right?
yeah.
So
That's a good one.
so what we should right so what we should do is actually limit the options that we have available to us in order to tap into our creativity and in order to improvise. So the old thing of like, hey, I had a teacher that used to give me two notes,
Or
and
one
I
note.
would have or one note. That's
Yeah,
right, just one note, and create, improvise with that note, right?
yeah,
And he was funny, man, because he always used to say, "Hey, if you can't improvise with two notes, adding a third one won't make it easier, or adding a
right.
fourth one doesn't." Right, right. And so what stifles creativity and improvisation with students, especially all students, and even ourselves, because we're students of music, is that we just start with too much information.
Yeah,
Period.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the classic teacher mistake, like inexperienced teacher, like, you go into the lesson
Yes.
and the teacher gives you all this information. Like, no, that's not a good way to teach. It's better to start with a little bit of information and let the student be
Correct.
creative and actually use the information. But yeah, when I first started teaching, I made that mistake a few times. Just, you know,
Yeah. Right.
you're looking at a
Yeah.
tune
Yeah.
and
Because
like,
what?
go ahead.
Right. Well, what we do is you're absolutely spot on, because what we do is we go, oh, we don't want to bore this student, so we give them a lot of information, and
Yeah.
in reality, what we end up is doing something far worse. We end up frustrating them as opposed
Yeah.
to boring them. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you could bring in a tune from the real book to a lesson, and I could tell you like every single chord voicing, every single mode that goes with every single chord, and give you all that information in 5 or 10 minutes, and then ask you to play. But what's going to happen is your brain is just going to shut down, and you won't be able to play because you're thinking too hard about all the stuff that I just tried to teach.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so yeah, especially with improvisation, like just starting with less, just starting with a few musical elements and then adding like one at a
Correct.
time. Like you don't add like 10 elements, on take
Yeah.
two.
Well, and you know what's really funny? The most mature jazz musicians use less.
Yeah,
you know, that's one of the characteristics of maturity. As a player, as a performer.
yeah.
So, all right. Here's another topic I want you to address because I think students they wrestle with this as well, and that is articulation. Articulation. You know, everybody wants to sound like a jazz pianist, like a jazz musician, right? And it comes down to articulation. How do we articulate? So, how do you address that with students there at Belmont? How do you address that with your private students? How do you help a student get a grip on articulation?
Well, it's one of my favorite concepts. And before I answer the question directly, I'll just tell you a quick story, which is when I started studying jazz in my first semester of college, my teacher was all into Bill Evans, and he said "Kind of Blue" was one of the secrets of the universe. And of course, I got the I got the Kind of Blue record, and I listened to it, and I love Bill Evans, and nothing against Bill Evans, but it was the Wynton Kelly track on there was the one
Right.
that was the one that changed my life, because I
Right.
had already heard Bill Evans play before, and
Right.
you know,
Right.
but I had never heard Wynton Kelly, and I didn't know it at the time. But what made that sound so unique is the articulation that he uses.
Right.
To
Right.
me, it was just like I didn't know the piano could sound like that, because I just didn't know you could get that much personality out of the piano, and the way that he does that is by varying his articulation, his great swing feel, his combination of long and short notes, barely any use of the pedal. And so
Right.
the big enemy of articulation is the pedal, right? Because
No doubt.
when you have the pedal down, you don't hear the release of the notes, right? So, um,
Right.
and the attack is different too, because when you attack the note, you're still hearing the wash from the previous notes. So basically, the two things that you have as a pianist at your disposal, the attack and the release of the note, because you can't do anything to the note after you've attacked it, right? Like you can't crescendo
Right.
or do vibrato on the note, right?
Right.
Because it's a percussion instrument,
Right.
so all you have is the attack and the decay. So if you have the pedal
Right.
down all the time, you've just eliminated all of the options and articulations because everything's going to sound like a big echo
Correct.
chamber. So the first thing
Right.
I need to do with students is to get them off the pedal, and I preach to them
Right.
all the time, like play everything without pedal, everything. I don't care if it's a ballad or a
Right.
romantic classical piece. Play everything without pedal. See what your hands can do, and then add the pedal. And at that point, the pedal actually adds
Right.
something to the music, right? It's
Right.
not a default switch, Like when I
Yeah.
sit down to the
Right.
piano, the pedal is down, like it shouldn't be that.
Correct.
So yeah, so that's how it works for me. Like if you practice without pedal, and then you can see what you connect, what you can connect, what you can't connect. You can focus on the attacks and the releases of the notes, and then develop
Well,
your sound.
right.
Go ahead.
And without the pedal, you actually end up learning how to control the instrument as opposed to the instrument controlling you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah. And I love the pedal. It's a beautiful sound, but it's not, like I said, it's
Correct.
not a default switch. And I'll give you another just real quick story. Brian Bromberg, great bass player, was given a clinic here at Belmont, and he was practicing without his amp. He was practicing electric bass without his amp. And he was talking about how students always go to the amp for their sound. They're always looking for just to get the tone just right on that amp.
Oh, that's a yeah.
And
That's
he's
a
saying,
that's
no,
great.
the
Yeah.
sound comes from your fingers. It comes from your articulation and how you attack the notes. So
Right.
we were in a medium-sized recital hall, and he's up there playing without an amp, and everyone's being real quiet trying to listen. But his point was that your sound, your voice, your personality, it starts at the beginning of the attack of the note. It's not the stuff
Right.
that goes after that really gives your
Right.
sound. It's not like the amp or the pedal. Yeah, so yeah, just getting, just focusing on how you're attacking and releasing the notes to get the sound that you want is, that's really important.
Right. And the other thing, I think which is really important, talk about the use of technology today. I try, wow, how a student today can take their phone that they have in their back pocket, they can turn on record and record themselves practicing or playing and just little snippets, right? So they can start hearing themselves away from the instrument, right? Because as an artist that the way you hear at the instrument and the way you hear away from the instrument, quite often those two things don't match up perfectly, right?
Sure.
So being able to practice, if you want to really get an idea of how you sound, how you're articulating, man, pull that cell phone out and hit the record button for 5 minutes and then listen back to it later.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you listen back to something, it gives you a little bit more of an objective approach to I guess.
Yeah.
But the good thing is if you record yourself a lot and become comfortable with that, and it's painful sometimes, but if you, it's like recording myself speaking or being on video can be painful sometimes too. But
right.
The more you do it, the more comfortable you become with how you actually sound. And
right.
That's pretty important, because if you're going to subject other people to it, then you should be the person that's most familiar with it, right? So definitely recording yourself is definitely great.
So, who are right now? Who are your favorite pianists? Who are your favorite jazz pianists? Most influential in your life?
Yeah, so this is always the hardest question for me.
It's a tough one, right? Because there's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many, right?
And there's so many, and I listen to different pianists for different things, and I listen to non-pianists, and I listen to music outside
right.
of jazz as well. So. Yeah, it's a really, really hard question. But I should be more prepared for the question than I actually am. I guess if we kind of go chronologically, to the earlier, if we start with the earlier jazz pianists, and kind of work up to the more modern ones, that might be a way to approach it. So as far as I'm thinking about pianists that I've transcribed and kind of studied. I think Thelonious Monk and Wynton Kelly, Red Garland, any of Miles Davis's pianists or rhythm section players, I'm a huge fan of. The whole, Red Garland, Wynton Kelly, Bill Evans. I think Hank Jones was in there for a minute with Miles.
Yeah.
But I've definitely really into Red Garland and Wynton Kelly for sure. And Thelonious Monk, just like all of us, it's just such a unique musical personality. So I love those guys. And then, coming right out of those guys, you've got guys like Wynton Kelly and McCoy Tyner. Sorry, not Wynton Kelly. McCoy Tyner and Herbie Hancock. So I love those guys as well. And then, as far as I did the book on Kenny Kirkland, and like I said, Kenny was somebody that I was listening to when I was first getting into jazz, and it really overwhelmed me. And I wish I had good advice, and I wish I had been transcribing him back then when I first started listening to him, but I waited 20 years or whatever it was to actually study him. But I love everything that Branford Marsalis has ever done, and Kenny is on a lot of that stuff. I love everything that Kenny Garrett has ever done, and Kenny Kirkland was on some of that stuff as well. So I love all that stuff. I also, I like the fusion stuff from the 70s, like Chick and Herbie and Miles, and I love all that stuff. There's some guys that are around now that are really intriguing, like Jason Moran is really, really great. Jeffrey Keyser is a guy that I really like. He's a little bit under the radar. He lives out in San Diego, I think. Just
tremendous.
Great player, really creative guy. Let's see. Michel Camilo is another guy that I really, really appreciate his stuff. There's just so many. There's so many. Jerry Allen.
Right.
It's really interesting.
It's so fun. It's so funny because. When I drive to work, I always give this example. I might drive to work this morning and he'll hear Bill Evans play, right? And I say to myself, Oh man, that's exactly how jazz piano should be played. That's perfect. That's perfection, right? Then I go home in the evening and I'll be listening to somebody. Hank Jones comes on and I go, oh, well, that's perfect right there. That's the way jazz piano should be played,
Yeah.
right? And then tomorrow morning, I'm hearing Teddy Wilson, and I go, that's the way the piano should be played. You know, so it's so hard because all these guys, when you listen to them, you just marvel in how wonderful they sound. So it's a tough question because they're all so influential.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, this has been a thrill. This has been a joy to have you on Jazz Piano Skills and introduce you to the Jazz Piano Skills listeners. And I hope you'll come back and visit again so we can continue this conversation, because it's been incredibly enlightening, not just for the listeners of Jazz Piano Skills, but for myself as well. And the other thing I want to say is thank you for all that you're doing there at Belmont University and working with the students, all your commitment to education and jazz music and jazz education, and your commitment to help train the next set of young lions that are going to continue to promote and share this art form with people around the world. So thank you for me and for all the Jazz Piano Skills listeners as well.
Oh, it's been a huge pleasure. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. It was totally unexpected, and it was just a great surprise. I mean, we could go for 3 more hours easily. You know, like it's been a lot of fun speaking with you, and questions are great, and I'm looking forward to checking out the Jazz Piano Skills website and all of your stuff, in more detail as well. So thank you very much for looking me up and having me on. And let's keep in touch.
We definitely will. I look forward to continuing our friendship. And Anthony, we'll have you back on soon. And I encourage everybody out there listening to please check out Anthony online. Check out all the activities at Belmont University that's going on, and the fabulous programs that they're offering for music students. And do a little investigation, and I'm sure you're going to love it. You'll enjoy listening to Anthony play, and there's a lot of recordings out there of him online as well. So okay, Anthony, thank you so much.
You can find me. I said if you can spell my last name, you can find me.
Yeah, so it's B-E-L, right? F-I-G-L-I-O.
You got it.
Belfiglio.
Works in 3 parts like that.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Anthony.
Really appreciate it. All right, thank you.
My pleasure.